To begin with, on the Junkers 52 Famil, we'll look at the left engine. Here we see there's a fuel gauge on the left, and then on the right we have an oil level indicator. Now these exist for each engine on the Junkers 52. Starting off in the cockpit, we'll look at the flap indicator, 0 degrees through 40 degrees, and the horizontal stabiliser incidence indicator. Coming to the right of the seat, we have a red handle. This is the flap control. If we pull the flap control to the up or on position, then when you move the horizontal stabiliser wheel, the flap control is going to move as well. But if the flap control is in the down position, only the stabiliser is going to move. So as we'll see, with the control on, if we move the horizontal stabiliser, the flaps and the stabiliser will move together. And to show the control movement, if we're pulling it aft, we're going to raise the nose and extend the flaps, and vice versa if we push it forward. Going back towards the main panel, first off we have the magnetic compass. Here's the rudder trim. If we pull the left handle down, it's going to increase the left trim. Bringing it back up to the center will neutralize it. And then pulling the right trim down will increase the right trim, and bring it back to the center will neutralize it. Now looking at the main panel, we have the airspeed indicator in kilometers per hour, the first altimeter, a course deviation indicator, turn and bank indicator, clock, artificial horizon, the second altimeter, which is more accurate, the homing indicator used for navigation, vertical speed in meters per second, and your course selector. Shifting over to the middle, we have the tachometers for each engine, oil temperature gauges for oil flowing out of each engine, oil temperature gauges for oil flowing into each engine, oil pressure gauges for each engine, the fuel pressure for each engine. Then we have brake hydraulic pressure for the left and right, and a brake air pressure and pressure reduction valve gauge, and the fire extinguisher pressure gauge. Coming down a little further, we have magnetos, the engine starters, and the fuel valves. Looking down here, we have engine controls. So the ones in the yellow are the throttle. So if you have the throttle set to about 25%, you're going to be at idle power with no brakes. Moving it forward, we can go to maximum power, and then if we pull it back down below 25%, it's actually going to engage the wheel brakes for the left and right side. Underneath the throttle in the blue, we have the mixture controls. If the mixture controls are put all the way down, that's full rich, and if they bring all the way up, that's lean. Now the Junkers 52 has a co-pilot, so looking over at that position, there's an outside air temperature gauge. And you can also see that a lot of the pilot controls are duplicated on his side. Here we have oil radiator controls. When the red needle is all the way at the top, it's fully open, and if it's down the bottom, it's closed. And then we have the cowling flaps controls on the right. Looking a little further over to the right, we have the parking brake. If that switch is in the aft position, the parking brake is off. And then we push it forward, pull the handle, and it comes back on. That switch there is the landing light. And then up behind the co-pilot's head, we have another panel, and this contains your navigation lights, as well as your cockpit and instrument lighting. So now we'll get the Junkers 52 started, and since the entire process is automated, we're going to need to press the letter E, and that'll begin the process. Now that all three engines have started, we regain control of the airplane. So we'll make sure that the oil and water radiators are all fully open with a red needle at the top. Then we'll release the parking brake and we're ready to taxi. When taxiing the Junkers 52, you can use the throttles if you like to control the braking, but the game provides you the option of being able to use toe brakes on rudder pedals if you have them, to help make this control easier to use. So I'll do a quick burst on my rudder pedals to show you the toe brakes in action, and then we'll continue taxiing towards the runway. Take off from the Junkers 52, we'll set our horizontal stabiliser trim to +2, turn the flap control on, and then we'll bring the stabiliser trim to neutral. This will put the flaps at 25 degrees. Then we'll ensure the rudder trim is neutral, mixers are fully rich, open the cowling flaps and oil radiators. Then we'll increase our throttle gradually to max. At 110 km per hour we'll rotate, then we'll retract the flaps and we'll climb at about 140 km per hour. So now we'll get ourselves on the runway, pull the throttles back to make sure we engage the brakes and come to a stop. Looking over, we set our horizontal stabiliser trim to +2. Then we turn the flap control on, and putting the stabiliser trim to 0 will bring the flaps to 25 degrees. Our rudder trim is neutral, mixture is rich. Cowl flaps and oil radiators are both open, so we're good to go. So we'll start increasing our power up to the maximum and we'll get rolling. There's not much of a tendency for the Junkers to go either way on the runway, so it's very easy to keep straight. At about 70 km per hour, we're going to push the nose down just a touch. Let the plane accelerate further. Then we'll get to 110 km per hour. Slight back pressure and we'll rotate. Begin accelerating to about 140 km per hour. Start retracting the flaps gradually, maintaining a positive rate of climb. So we'll just continue climbing up to pattern altitude, and then we'll go through the before landing checklist. To land the Junkers 52, you initially want your airspeed on downwind to be below 170 km per hour. Then you'll set the horizontal stabiliser trim to +2, turn the flap control on, make sure the mixers are rich and that the cowl flaps and oil radiators are both open. By the end of downwind, we'll be at about 150 km per hour, and then we'll extend the flaps to 25 degrees. Then we'll start our descending base to final turn at about 140 km per hour, and then once we're established on the final, we'll extend the flaps out fully to 40 degrees, maintaining between 130 and 140 km per hour. Alright, so we're doing about 150 km per hour on the downwind, so we'll set our stabiliser trim to +2. Make sure our mixtures are rich, our radiators and cowling flaps are open. We maintain our position on downwind. Coming up on the end of downwind, so we're going to get ready to extend the flaps out to 25 degrees. There we are. Bring the flaps out 25 degrees. Now we'll continue flying downwind for a little bit longer. Look back at the runway, begin reducing the power a little bit, and we'll begin our base to final turn, maintaining it at about 140 kilometers per hour. Just a nice gradual turn. It only takes very minute changes in pitch and power to maintain my airspeed. Now I'm also trying to get my aiming point at the beginning of the runway like usual. As I'm nearly established in final, starting to get ready, I'm going to put out the flaps to 40 degrees. Add some forward pressure to keep the plane flying down towards my aiming point. Now I'll be doing between 130 and 140 kilometers per hour. As I'm approaching my aiming point, begin rounding out the airplane, bringing the power back to about 25 to 30% because I don't want to have the wheel brakes engaged when I touch down. Hold the 3-point position, plane touches down, holding full back pressure. I can let the plane start rolling to a stop, and then when I'm ready, I can pull the throttles back even further and begin applying the wheel brakes to come to a complete stop. Then once the airplane's coming back to a complete stop, you can reset your stabilizer trim, bring the flaps to 0, and then taxi to parking. That completes the familiar video for the Youngest 52, so you can watch more videos by clicking them here, and you can subscribe by clicking on my channel icon in the middle.